Imagine a predator that has never walked the earth. It has no biological lineage, no single habitat, and no true scientific name. Yet, if you were to travel back 5,000 years and walk into a mud brick hut in Babylon, a bamboo stilt house in China, or a limestone temple in the Americas, and you drew this creature in the dirt, every single person would recoil in the exact same paralyzed terror. They would know its name before you spoke it. How is this possible? How did isolated civilizations, separated by vast oceans and centuries of silence, all hallucinate the exact same nightmare? To understand this impossibility, we have to trace the bloodline of the dragon, not through biology, but through the darkest corridors of the human psyche. To survive this journey, we must unlock 4 specific doors. Door number 1 is the cosmic autopsy, where we will see how the entire universe was carved from the corpse of a monster. Door number 2 is the eternal night, a place where the sun dies every single evening and must be resurrected by magic. Door number 3 is the boneyard, where we dig up the terrifying fossils that convinced our ancestors these things were real. And finally, door number 4 is the mirror, which reveals why this ancient beast is actually a reflection of you. Stay with us, because what lies behind that last door changes everything you think you know about your own fears. Let's step through the first door, back to the very beginning of written thought in Mesopotamia. Forget the sanitized fairy tales you were told as a child. In the beginning, there was no garden, no gentle light, and no peace. There was only a screaming storm and a struggle for survival. The enemy here is not a rival king or a jealous neighbor. It is a serpent the size of an ocean. The earliest scribes took wet clay and etched a story of absolute dread called the Enuma Elish. In this vision, the primordial waters are Tiamat, a mother of gods who twists her form into a vast, chaotic sea monster. She is the embodiment of everything that wants to kill you. Against her stands the young god Marduk, and what happens next is not a battle. It is a butchery. Visualize the violence of this moment. Marduk doesn't just defeat her. He summons the winds to tear the oceans open. When Tiamat opens her mouth to swallow him, he drives the hurricane down her throat, bloating her body until her belly is tight as a drum. Then, with surgical precision, he looses an arrow that splits her heart. But the horror doesn't end with her death. Marduk stands over the massive, twitching corpse of chaos and commits an act that defines the ancient world. He slices her body in half like a dried fish. From one bloody half, he constructs the dome of the sky. From the other, he lays the foundations of the earth. He pierces her eyes, and from the sockets flow the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. This is the first and most terrifying lesson of the dragon. Creation is not a gentle blossoming, it is a crime scene. The ground you walk on is made from the carcass of a monster that had to be put down. This idea that order is just a thin layer of skin over a chaotic skeleton runs through the veins of the Near East. You can feel the anxiety in the Hittite myths of Anatolia, where the storm god doesn't just fight a dragon named Iluyanka, he gets mutilated by it. The serpent steals the god's eyes and his heart. Stop and picture that image. A god, blind and heartless, stumbling through a world plunging into darkness. It is a parable about what happens when chaos wins. In these stories, victory is never clean, and it is never free. The god eventually wins by marrying his own son into the serpent's family, a political trap that ends with the son dying alongside the monster. These aren't adventure stories. They are warnings written in blood. They tell you that safety is expensive, and sometimes the price is everything you love. But why were they so obsessed with this specific shape? Why a serpent? To understand this, you have to put yourself in the sandals of a person living along the Nile or the Euphrates 3,000 years ago. You don't have radar or satellites or insurance. Your entire life, the lives of your children, and the future of your city depend on the river rising at the exact right time. If it rises too high, it wipes you off the map. If it doesn't rise enough, you starve to death. When the waters rage out of control, thrashing against the banks, it doesn't look like physics. It looks like a snake. The river coils, it strikes, and it swallows the land. The dragon wasn't a fantasy. It was the flood. In Egypt, they took this fear and turned it into a nightly war. Every evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the Egyptians believed the sun god Ra sailed his boat into the dark river of the underworld. And waiting for him there was Apep, the serpent of non-existence. This wasn't a metaphor. The priests believed that if they stopped their rituals, the sun would actually fail to rise. Imagine the pressure of that belief. In the temples, hidden away from the public, priests performed the liturgy of overthrowing Apep. They made wax figures of the serpent, grotesque little effigies of darkness. Then, with frantic intensity, they would trample them, stab them with iron knives, and burn them until the wax hissed and evaporated. They were murdering the night so that you could see the morning. This universal fear wasn't just born from floods and sunsets, though. The ancients had physical proof. Imagine you are digging a foundation for a temple in a limestone cliff in China or a riverbed in Greece. You strike something hard. You clear away the dust and pull out a bone. It is a jawbone, but it is lined with teeth the size of daggers. Or you find a femur as thick as a tree trunk. You have never seen an animal this big. You don't know what a dinosaur is. Your mind, desperate to make sense of this anomaly, supplies the missing flesh. You add scales to armor the bone. You add wings to explain how it moved. You add fire to explain the destruction it brings. The dragon is what happens when the human mind meets the inexplicable remains of a lost world. We didn't invent dragons. We reconstructed them from the graveyard of the earth. But as civilizations grew, the dragon began to change. It stopped being just a force of nature that needed to be survived and started becoming a test that needed to be passed. The story shifted from a god butchering a carcass to a hero proving his worth. In the humid jungles of India and the rocky islands of Greece, a new type of dragon slayer was stepping forward. One who wasn't just fighting for survival, but for power. And this shift from victim to victor brings us to the next phase of the legend, where the dragon stops being the world and starts being the treasure. The fight is not sport. It is a struggle for a livable world where the prize is not a gold trophy, but the rain itself. In the stifling heat of the Indus Valley, the enemy is Vitra, a dragon whose very name means the obstacle, because he has coiled his massive body around the world's water supply and choked it off. Imagine the physical sensation of a drought that refuses to break. The ground cracking like old pottery, the dust coating your throat, the silence of a dying farm. In the Rig Veda, the storm god Indra doesn't just walk up and punch this thing. He prepares like a berserker. He downs a sacred draught called Soma to fuel his rage, grips a thunderbolt forged by a divine craftsman, and strikes with such cataclysmic force that the text says the mountains actually split open. This isn't just a battle, it is an excavation. When the dragon dies, the 7 rivers burst free, roaring back into their courses like blood returning to a limb that was asleep. This is the clean, violent logic of a river culture. If the dragon lives, you starve. If the dragon dies, you eat. But as the story travels west, the monster grows more heads, and the water gets deeper. On the coast of Canaan, the storm lord Baal locks horns with Lotan, a creature the clay tablets describe as the fleeing serpent and the twisting serpent. Here, the dragon has 7 heads, a number that wasn't chosen at random. In the ancient mind, 7 was the number of completeness, meaning this beast is the embodiment of total, perfect power. This image was so potent it bled into the Hebrew scriptures, where the Leviathan laughs at the rattling of spears and treats iron like it is rotting straw. You can feel the sheer scale of this thing in the book of Job, where smoke pours from its nostrils like a boiling pot. The message here is stark and humbling. The world is full of chaotic forces that mock your human strength, and only a god with a storm in his fist has any hope of breaking them. Then the landscape shifts again, moving into the jagged mountains and isolated islands of Greece. And here the dragon stops being just a weather system and starts becoming a guardian. It coils around the things you need most: a spring of fresh water, a grove of golden apples, or the foundation of a future city. To get the prize, you have to do something gruesome. Look at Cadmus, the founder of Thebes. He doesn't just kill the serpent guarding the spring. He rips out its teeth and sows them into the earth like seeds. But instead of corn, armored men spring up from the dirt and immediately start killing each other. It is a surreal, hallucinatory nightmare that teaches a brutal political lesson. A city is grown from blood, and civilization is something you have to wrestle from the wild with a spear. But sheer force was about to meet its match in a foul marsh called Lerna. When Heracles wades into the swamp to face the Hydra, he learns the hard way that violence can sometimes make the problem worse. Every time he hacks off a head, 2 more rip their way out of the bloody stump. Stop and visualize the sensory overload of this fight. The water is black and poisonous. The air smells of rot. The sweat is stinging Heracles' eyes, and the monster is multiplying every time he swings his sword. He is losing by winning. The only way out is not strength, but a cruel kind of chemistry. He calls for his nephew to bring fire. As Heracles severs a neck, the boy jams a burning torch into the open wound, searing the flesh shut before the new heads can sprout. The hiss of burning meat and the smell of cauterized skin signal the victory. This is the pivot point in human history where we realized that the dragon is clever, and to beat it, you have to be sharper than the blade you carry. But while the West was burning its monsters to ash, the East was doing something completely different, taming them. While Heracles was searing the necks of the Hydra in a toxic Greek swamp, a completely different reality was taking shape 5,000 miles to the east. If you were to stand in the yellow dust of a Neolithic village in China, you wouldn't find a hero sharpening a sword to kill a monster. You would find a farmer falling to his knees to pray to one. Here, the dragon is not a mistake of creation that needs to be butchered. It is the architect of the atmosphere itself. In the West, the dragon is the fire that burns the village. In the East, it is the rain that saves the crop. Archaeologists digging in the Northeast have unearthed jade figures from 5 millennia ago. Curled, embryonic shapes they call pig dragons. buried with the dead not as a warning, but as a sacred link to the power of the sky. This creature doesn't hoard gold in a cave. It hoards the one thing more valuable than metal: water. When the clouds gather and the sky turns the color of a bruised plum, the ancient Chinese didn't see a weather front. They saw a dragon rolling over in its sleep. The thunder wasn't a sound, it was a voice. To understand why this reverence ran so deep, you have to look at the anatomy of the creature itself. It is a biological impossibility, a chimera constructed from the most dominant parts of the animal kingdom. It has the body of a serpent, the claws of an eagle, the antlers of a deer, and the scales of a carp. It is the ultimate apex predator because it is every predator combined. But this power wasn't wild. It was strictly regulated by the most terrifying force of all: the state. The dragon became the exclusive avatar of the emperor, the son of heaven. Imagine the tension of walking into the forbidden city. You are surrounded by walls of 9 glazed dragons, each watching you with eyes that never blink. The emperor sits on a dragon throne, wearing a dragon robe embroidered with beasts that are climbing toward a flaming pearl, a symbol of perfect wisdom or the moon itself. But look closer at the embroidery. If you were a commoner, or even a prince, and you wore a dragon with 5 claws, you weren't just making a fashion mistake, you were committing treason. The 5-clawed dragon was for the emperor alone. Everyone else had to settle for 4 or 3. The dragon here is not a creature of chaos. It is the logo of absolute political order. This aquatic worship didn't stop at the Great Wall. It flooded the entire Asian continent. In the sweltering heat of India, the Nagas are serpent kings who live in jeweled palaces beneath the water, guarding the scriptures and the rain. In the floating markets of Thailand, temple gates open like fanged mouths, and the stairs are guarded by balustrades that ripple like living coil. Even in the silence of a Japanese shrine, you wash your hands from a bronze mouth shaped like a dragon, a ritual reminder that the water you are touching is a gift from a god who could easily take it back. These cultures understood a fundamental truth that the West had forgotten. You don't fight the ocean. You make a deal with it. You respect the river because if you insult the spirit within it, the flood will wash your history away. But as we leave the rice paddies and the monsoon seasons behind and sail our longships into the freezing gray waters of the north, the dragon undergoes a horrific mutation. The benevolence vanishes. The rain stops. The creature that waits for us in the deep fjords of Scandinavia doesn't want to feed the people. It wants to eat them. It is no longer a god of the weather. It is a prisoner of its own appetite. And unlike the Eastern dragon, which flies toward the heavens, this new monster is digging itself into the ground, obsessed with a single cold metal that drives men mad. We are about to enter the age of the Horde. Sail out of the sunlit Mediterranean, past the olive groves and the warm marble temples, and steer your boat into the freezing gray waters of the North Sea. Here, the dragon undergoes a terrifying metamorphosis. In the east, it was a creature of the clouds that brought life. In the north, it becomes a creature of the earth that guards death. The Norse poets tell us that the ocean itself is a prison for a serpent named Jormungandr, a beast so vast it encircles the entire planet and bites its own tail to keep the world from falling apart. Imagine the psychological weight of being a Viking sailor, drifting on a black sea, knowing that the horizon isn't a line, but a living spine. There is a story of the god Thor rowing out to the deepest water, baiting a hook with the severed head of an ox, and pulling on the line with such manic violence that his feet crash right through the bottom of the boat. He stares into the abyss, and the abyss stares back with yellow eyes. But just as he raises his hammer to end the world, the line is cut. The sea closes over the coils, and the monster sinks back into the dark. This is the northern fear, the knowledge that something massive is moving beneath you, and a single reckless mistake could drag it to the surface. But the terror of the north doesn't just swim, it digs. If you look at the roots of the world tree, Yggdrasil, you find Nidhogg, a dragon that doesn't fly or breathe fire, but simply chews. It lives in the mist and frost, gnawing on the roots of creation and sucking the marrow from the bones of dead men. This isn't a battle, it is an infestation. It is a graphic metaphor for rot, a reminder that even the strongest tree has something eating it from the bottom up. Yet the most dangerous dragon in the northern mind isn't the one that eats roots. It's the one that eats your soul. In these frozen lands, the dragon develops a new, fatal addiction: gold. Not the spending of it, but the heavy, cold stillness of it. The hoard is not just a pile of metal, it is a radioactive core of greed that mutates everything it touches. Consider the tragedy of Fafnir. He wasn't born a monster. He was a son who murdered his own father for a pile of cursed gold. He took the treasure to a desolate heath and just sat on it. He sat there for so long, brooding in the dark, that his skin hardened into scales and his voice dropped into a hiss. He became a dragon simply because he refused to let go. The hero, Sigurd, doesn't defeat him with a frontal assault. He has to act like an assassin. Imagine you are Sigurd. You dig a trench in the mud where the beast crawls to drink. You lie in the filth, heart hammering against your ribs, smelling the sulfur and the rot. You wait for the massive, hot weight of the belly to pass over your head. Then you thrust the sword upward. When the steel slides out, the blood floods the trench, and the dragon speaks. This is the chilling twist of the northern myth. The monster is intelligent. Fafnir spends his dying breath analyzing you, warning you that the gold which killed him will now kill you. The dragon is no longer just a beast. It is a mirror reflecting the inevitable rot of the human heart. This curse follows the dragon into the great epic of Beowulf. Here, the dragon isn't a god or a demon. It is a consequence. An ancient hoard lies in a barrow, sleeping until a single thief steals a single cup. That one act of petty greed wakes the apocalypse. The dragon rises and burns the countryside, not out of hunger, but out of a sense of violated ownership. Beowulf, now an old king, walks out to face it, and his weapons fail him. His shield melts, his sword shatters. He wins only because a loyal young soldier, Wiglaf, stabs the beast in the soft underbelly. But watch how the old king dies. He doesn't ask for his family. He asks to see the gold. He sits against the cold stone wall of the cave, bleeding out, staring at the rusty cups and ancient arm rings. He thanks God that he won this treasure for his people. But the tragedy is that the gold is useless. It is buried with him. The dragon is dead, but the greed that created it has just found a new host. The North teaches us that you can kill the monster, but you can never kill the desire that made it. And as the Middle Ages dawn, this moral battlefield is about to get a new commander. The priests are coming, and they are bringing a weapon sharper than any sword: faith. The dragon did not die when the old gods faded. It simply changed its address. It moved from the frozen barrows of the north to the stained glass of the high Middle Ages, and in doing so, it became something far more dangerous than a monster. It became a metaphor. In this new world of stone cathedrals and incense, the dragon was no longer just a physical threat. It was the embodiment of sin itself. But the church knew that you cannot kill a metaphor with a sword. You have to kill it with a symbol. Enter St. George. The story you know is a lie. In the original Golden Legend, George doesn't just ride in and slay the beast to save the girl. He wounds it, and then, in a moment of bizarre, ritualistic theater, he asks the princess to take off her girdle and tie it around the dragon's neck. The monster doesn't die screaming. It follows her back to the city like a tame dog. The message was perfectly calibrated propaganda. Faith doesn't just destroy the devil, it humiliates him. But the saints didn't always need a lance. Sometimes they used the sheer, terrifying power of the voice. Look at Saint Martha in France. She finds the Tarasque, a beast that has been dragging soldiers into the river, and she doesn't raise a weapon. She sprinkles it with holy water and sings a hymn. The monster collapses, paralyzed by the sound of holiness, allowing the townspeople to beat it to death while it offers no resistance. Or consider Saint Margaret of Antioch, who was swallowed whole by a dragon in her prison cell. Imagine the claustrophobia, the heat, the smell of gastric acid. But she is holding a small wooden cross. She prays, the cross expands, and she bursts through the dragon's back, alive and unscarred. These stories weren't just entertainment, they were public safety announcements. They told the terrified peasant that the church had a weapon for every nightmare. And if you look up at the roof of a cathedral, you can see the final victory, the gargoyle. The dragon, once the king of chaos, has been reduced to a piece of plumbing, forced to spit rainwater to keep the saints dry. This wasn't just stories, though. To the medieval mind, the dragon was as real as the plague. If you walked into a dimly lit church in 12th century Europe, you might look up and see a dragon hanging from the rafters. It was likely a withered crocodile skin brought back from the Crusades, or the bleached jawbone of a whale washed up on a cold beach. But you don't know that. You see the scales, the teeth, the impossible size, and your blood runs cold. Apothecaries sold dragon's tongue, which was actually fossilized shark teeth, to cure poisons. The physical evidence was everywhere. The fear was tactile. It was hanging above your head while you prayed. The church used this biology to anchor their theology. The monster is real, which means the sin is real, which means you need us to survive it. But while the priests were taming dragons with hymns, the common people were inventing a much dirtier way to kill them. Leave the cathedral and walk down to the village pub, and you hear a different kind of story, one of iron, sweat, and craft. In the English ballads, the hero isn't a saint. He's a guy with a plan. Take the story of the Lambton worm. A young heir returns home to find a massive, eel-like creature wrapping itself around a hill and crushing the life out of his inheritance. He knows he can't outmuscle a mountain, so he outthinks it. He commissions a suit of armor covered in razor-sharp blades. He stands in the middle of the river and waits. When the worm coils around him to crush him, it shreds itself on the spikes. The river washes the pieces away before they can reattach. It is brutal, industrial, and clever. Or look at the knight Somerville, who kills the Linton worm not with a sword, but by taking a spear, wrapping the tip in peat and pitch, lighting it on fire, and jamming it down the monster's throat. The dragon bursts from the inside out. These weren't miracles. They were engineering problems solved with extreme violence. The dragon was no longer a god to be appeased or a devil to be exorcised. It was a biological tank that could be destroyed if you had enough spikes, enough fire, and enough nerve to stand your ground. By the 19th century, the dragon was effectively dead. The map of the world had been filled in. The blank spaces where monsters used to live were paved over with railroads and factories, and the only dragons left were cartoons in political newspapers or dusty bones in a museum case. Science had killed the magic, and the Industrial Revolution had buried the corpse. But then, in the quiet, smoke-filled study of an Oxford professor, a match was struck that would not only resurrect the beast, but turn it into the most dominant symbol of the modern age. We are about to witness the greatest comeback story in mythology. To understand how a dead legend clawed its way out of the grave and into your living room, we must unlock the final 3 doors of our journey. Door number 1 is the Golden Voice, where a single conversation in a mountain changed literature forever. Door number 2 is the Celluloid Nightmare, where the dragon learned to move, breathe, and burn on a screen. And door number 3 is the Neural Link, a terrifying new bond where we stopped fighting the monster and started riding it. Enter the mind of J.R.R. Tolkien. Before him, dragons were often just big snakes that hissed and died. But in 1937, Tolkien did something radical. He gave the monster a personality. Picture the scene. A small, trembling burglar named Bilbo Baggins creeps into the heart of the lonely mountain. The air is thick, hot, and tastes of metal. He isn't met by a mindless beast roaring for blood. He is met by Smaug, a creature who speaks with the aristocratic arrogance of a wealthy landlord. Smaug is vain. He is funny. He is a psychopath who toys with his food. He lies on a bed of gold, not just because he is greedy, but because he believes he is the only being in the universe who matters. When he speaks, you don't hear a hiss. You hear the seductive, heavy purr of absolute power. Tolkien didn't just write a monster. He wrote a mirror for the 20th century, a creature of supreme intelligence and supreme selfishness. Smaug bridged the gap between the ancient Norse horde guardians like Fafnir and the modern villain, creating a character so vivid that he could fill 1,000 winter nights. But ink on a page was not enough. To reconquer the world, the dragon needed a body that you could see, and more importantly, one that you could fear. For decades, cinema struggled with this. Early films used rubber puppets that bobbed in water tanks, or stop-motion models that jerked across the screen. They were charming, but they weren't scary. Then, in the early 1980s, a film called Dragon Slayer introduced the world to Vermithrax. Pejorative. Stop and visualize this creature. It wasn't a clean, majestic beast. It was old, it was tired, and it was disgusting. Its wings creaked like rotting leather. It crawled through the mud with a cruel, sliding grace. When it breathed fire, it wasn't a flamethrower effect. It was a heavy, liquid sheet of napalm that looked like it had weight. The audience could practically smell the sulfur and the wet ash. This was the moment the dragon became biological. It wasn't a symbol of sin anymore. It was an apex predator that looked like it could actually exist, hunting in the dark corners of a world that felt terrified and real. However, The modern mind wasn't content with just fearing the dragon. We wanted to understand it. In the late 20th century, a massive psychological shift occurred. Writers like Anne McCaffrey and Ursula K. Le Guin stripped away the concept of the monster entirely. In The Dragon Riders of Pern, the dragon isn't an enemy. It is a partner, genetically engineered to protect humanity. Imagine the sensation of impression. The moment a human touches a hatching dragon, and a telepathic bond snaps into place that is fiercer than love and deeper than marriage. Suddenly, the fire isn't a weapon used against you. It is a tool you use to save your home. Le Guin went even further in Earthsea, making dragons the holders of the true language. Creatures of ancient wisdom who don't bargain with coins, but with names. This rewrote the rules of the game. The dragon became a complex, sentient being, a neighbor, a friend, a weapon of state, and a judge of character. We moved from St. George stabbing the beast to a young Daenerys Targaryen nursing 3 hatchlings that would grow into nuclear weapons. The dragon had evolved from the thing that destroys the world into the only thing that can save it. But the screen wasn't the final cage. In the 21st century, the dragon broke the 4th wall and entered the simulation. We didn't just want to watch the beast anymore, we wanted to hunt it. In the digital landscapes of Skyrim or the tabletop dungeons of a basement, the dragon became the ultimate final exam for human courage. You aren't just a spectator. You are the one listening for the roar across the ridge, watching for the shadow that blocks out the sun, and counting the seconds between breaths of fire. It became a puzzle of survival, where you had to learn the difference between a dragon that is hungry and a dragon that is just angry. The game taught a generation that you can walk into a cave with nothing but a sword and a plan and walk out with a story. Whether it is a level 20 red dragon on a grid map or a high-definition wyvern on a console, the lesson remains exactly the same as it was in the mud huts of Babylon. Knowledge first, courage next, and luck if you can find it. Why does this specific shape haunt us? Why does a kid in a modern apartment who has never seen a snake or a hawk instinctively know that a dragon is dangerous? Anthropologists have a terrifying theory. The dragon is a ghost of our evolutionary past. It is a composite image of the 3 predators that almost wiped our species off the planet. Take the coil of the snake that hides in the leaf litter. Take the stalking gaze of the big cat. Take the shadow of the raptor diving from the sky. Mash those 3 primal fears together in the dark panic of the human brain, and you get a dragon. It is a monster the size of all our troubles. We gave it scales because our ancestors learned that stone weapons bounced off thick hides. We gave it fire because that was the one force of nature we couldn't turn our backs on. The dragon isn't an animal. It is a biological memory of survival. And yet, in a twist that defines our species, we didn't run from this memory. We put it on a jersey. Go to a rugby match in Wales or a university in America, and you will see the dragon not as a symbol of evil, but as a badge of grit. We took the thing that tried to eat us and turned it into the thing that defines us. The red dragon on the Welsh flag isn't there to scare the citizens. It is there to remind them of a long fight for their own name. We wear the monster to prove we survived it. The dragon has become the ultimate container for the human experience. It is large enough to hold our fear of the dark, our greed for gold, our hope for rain, and our need to be brave when the odds are impossible. Here is the haunting realization that changes everything. We spent 5,000 years trying to slay the dragon, only to realize that the dragon was never the enemy. It was the fuel. The irony of history is that every great civilization, from the hydraulic empires of China to the merchant kings of Europe, built their order on the back of this chaos. Marduk didn't just kill Tiamat. He built the world out of her corpse. We tell ourselves we want a safe, quiet life, but the truth is, we worship the storm. We need the dragon because without the monster at the gate, the hero inside us never wakes up. The dragon is the only thing that forces us to build the wall, to forge the sword, and to stand together in the dark. Look in the mirror. You are fighting a dragon right now. It might not have scales, but it has a hoard. Maybe it's the digital gold of validation you can't stop scrolling for, paralyzed like Fafnir on his heap. Maybe it's the gnawing root of burnout eating you from the inside like Nidhogg. You are living in the same story as the ancient Viking and the Chinese farmer. The beast has just changed its skin. The question isn't whether the dragon is real. The anxiety in your chest proves it is. The question is, what you do when you hear the wings. So here is the choice that defines the rest of your life. Do you choose the path of St. George and try to kill the chaotic parts of your nature with iron and discipline? Or do you choose the path of the dragon rider and accept that the fire inside you is dangerous, but it's the only thing that will let you fly? Most people choose the sword. The legends choose the sky. If you want to survive the next chapter of human history, you're going to need to know what else is hiding in the dark. Hit subscribe to join the fellowship, because the monsters aren't gone. They're just waiting for the sequel. Our journey through this archive is closing. But if the night is still long and your mind is restless, your descent doesn't have to end here. Click the playlist on your screen to enter the Forbidden Archives. Hours of continuous dark lore with absolutely no mid-roll ads to wake you. Turn down the lights, close your eyes, and let me narrate your sleep. I'll see you in the shadows.